that the unborn differ from the newborn in 4 ways that have been used to disqualify the unborn as a human person. And those 4 categories, they go by an acronym called the Sled test. Stephen Schwartz, he's a pro-life apologist. He came up with this acronym. The 4 differences are size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. You guys need to memorize this stuff. When you're talking with someone and you give your scientific case, you're going to move to the philosophy. You're going to say, yeah, they differ. The newborn, which is a person, from the unborn. And there's 4 reasons why they're different. And that is size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. And what we're going to do now is we're going to look at each one of those distinctions, and we're going to actually do what's called a reductio ad absurdum. That is, we're going to reduce the argument to its absurd conclusion. Okay? That's what they do in philosophy. It's really cool. So we're going to show that if you apply any of these distinctions, you actually end up just excluding members of the human community that we already consider to be persons. And so to help make this illustration, I have this, I'm a parent of 2 now, so I've been going through the parenting books, and there's this little book called The Do's and Don'ts of Parenting that I've been reviewing. And so I'm going to use some images to help with that. Let's look at size. So they may try, I'm waiting for, that that humans vary in size. But does how big you are, does your size give you value? Just ask yourself, are men more valuable than women because they're larger or stronger? Are taller people worth more or have more value than shorter people? It's obvious that embryos and fetuses are smaller than newborns and adults, but why is that relevant? Clearly, your size has no bearing on your worth. Humans are valued because of what they are, not because of their size. Therefore, we shouldn't disqualify the unborn just because it's smaller. You'll hear that. It's so small. It can't be worth anything, right? It can't be valuable. What about physical appearance in general? Human value transcends appearance, whether we're talking about size or skin color or disfiguration or handicaps. So we can't disqualify the unborn based on size and physical appearance, okay? All of these, we would say, are human persons, regardless of those. Second, people will point to the unborn's level of development. They argue that they're not developed enough to be persons. It's okay to laugh. But does one's level of development really determine their value? True, the unborn is less developed than you or I, but how is that relevant? Some people will point to developmental capacities like self-awareness. If you're not self-aware, then you're not valuable. But if self-awareness really is the criteria that separates persons from non-persons, what do we do with the comatose? A person in a coma is not aware. What about when you're sleeping tonight and you're not self-aware? What about my 1-week-old? You could stare her in the eye. She is not self-aware, okay? She really doesn't know what's going on. And up to weeks, even months after they're born, self-awareness really isn't there, okay? And so that would, if we were really going to base personhood on this criteria, we would have to exclude all of these individuals as well. The same reasoning would apply. And so I think we don't want to base value on level of development. What about your environment? Does your environment, these are very helpful illustrations when you're a new father. You don't want to do any of those things. Does the unborn get value just for leaving the womb? Again, environment is completely irrelevant. In what way does your environment determine your value? And one philosopher put it, does where you are have any bearing on who you are? Okay? So this was taken, literally, we left here right before my wife's water broke. So that was like 9:30, 6 o'clock. There you go. And we're talking about a journey of 8 inches down the birth canal. Do we really want to say that that gives you value? I mean, this is just absurd. I want to show you Melinda Starr. She was born at 24 weeks and weighed 9 ounces. I'll show a portion of this video. I couldn't just there was no images out there. She was literally the size of her dad's hand when she was born, okay? 9 ounces is like a Coke can. Doctors worked heroically to save her life. Now, just take a look at her. And then I'll make a point. That's her later on. They show the picture in a second.
Show me your eyes. Show me your eyes.
Melinda Starr may be tiny, but to her parents and those who know her, she has the strength and courage of someone 100 times her size.
That she was always fighting, and all the nurses are saying that she was really feisty, that she was always fighting for her life.
She was 24 weeks old and weighed only 270 grams, barely more than half a pound.
In the first 3 days
So I'll just cut that off there. But what I wanted to say was, at 24 weeks, as she's in that incubator, now she has human value, but at 24 weeks, she could walk into an abortion clinic and the abortionist could murder the same child, the exact same child. Does that make any sense? I mean, if the abortionist came in when Melinda Starr was born and resting in her mother's arm and then killed her, would that make it right? In fact, that's what Kermit Gosnell was doing. He was giving birth to the children and then killing them. Maybe you guys heard the story of Kermit Gosnell. And now he's charged with murder. But how does this work? So it leaves the body and now it's murder, but just a few moments earlier, he could have killed the baby in the womb and it would have been fine. This doesn't make any sense. This reminds me of the Mason-Dixon line that divides Pennsylvania, which is to the north, Maryland to the south. If you were black and you were born in Pennsylvania in the early 1800s, and you were born in Pennsylvania, that was a free state. You'd be free. You were a person. You had rights. But if you were born just a few miles south in Maryland, which is a slave state, then you are entitled to no rights. So here's the slave states. The free ones are above there. How does that make sense? Where you were born, just an accident of where you were born determines whether you're a person or not. It's the same thing going on today. So your location should have no bearing on your value. The last thing is degree of dependency. So size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. Some of these things are just too funny. Okay, finally. Some will argue that the unborn is not a person because they're dependent on their mother for survival. But why does degree of dependency, why is that relevant to your value? True, the unborn depends on the mother for food, shelter, protection, health care. But how does viability equal value? The ability to survive completely independent of anyone or anything else, is that where you get your value? If it is, then we would have to exclude people who are on insulin. They depend on that for their survival. Kidney medication, like going on dialysis. Anyone who's received any kind of medical intervention to keep them alive. What about these two, Abby and Brittany Hensel? You guys heard of them? I think they were on Discovery Channel or something. They're conjoined twins. If there was ever an example of two people that are completely biologically dependent on each other for their survival, it's these two. But do we really want to say that Brittany is no longer valuable because she's dependent on her sister for her survival? Does that make any sense? Absolutely not. In fact, at least with the unborn, they eventually become viable. They eventually can live on their own. With these two, they will go their whole life and be completely dependent on each other for their survival. On this logic, these two should have less rights to life than the unborn. So the problem of trying to disqualify members from the human community through these arbitrary qualities like viability or environment or anything else, it turns out that you can use the same criteria to disqualify other members of the human community that we believe are persons. And so you got to be very careful when you make these distinctions. And we need to point these things out. If someone comes to you and they say, I believe it's size. Okay, then do some people have more rights? I'm pretty tall. Do I get more rights than people who are short? I'm voting for that one, no. But that's where that kind of logic leads you. Now, all of these arguments can be boiled down to the Sled test, but they can also go one step further. This is what we call age discrimination. The unborn are smaller because of the age they are. It's how old they are. That's why if they were given enough time, they'd be bigger. I mean, give my daughter 20 years, she's going to be 7 feet tall. I hope. The unborn is less developed because they haven't had enough time to develop. The unborn is in the environment it's in is because that's where humans develop initially. That's where they reside. The unborn is dependent on the mother for his or for her survival because of how old they are. In fact, they're still dependent. I mean, my brother, is he here? He's still dependent on my mother. He's 29 years old. So just as those who are, whiter have no right to kill those who are darker, neither should those who are older have any right to kill those who are younger. And this really is age discrimination. But you tell a pro-choicer that they're discriminating, and you've said like the cardinal sin, okay? You tell them that you're the inclusive one. You're the one who includes all humanity under the umbrella of persons, and they're the one who is being exclusive. They're the one pushing people out. And then all of a sudden they start to feel a little uncomfortable.